Welcome to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and tonight I'm joined by a very special panel of guests, including Colin Watt to my right, David Simmons from the Salt and Sauce Show, and James McDonagh, the manager of Edinburgh City. It's an absolute pleasure to have you in the studio tonight, gentlemen.
Pleasure to be here.
Cheers.
First up, we'll have a wee talk about the team selection. What's your biggest surprises, if any?
I mean, there's a few changes in that Celtic squad from the weekend, so
There are.
it's a bit of a surprise the amount of changes actually made rather than keeping a steady side, but we can maybe discuss that.
I'd say the biggest surprise for me, it looks like the formation. Looks as if I'm going to go 4-4-2 tonight, which I actually can't remember the last time Celtic went 4-4-2. It's always been that sort of 4-3-2-1. It might surprise us. Maybe Klamala will play out wide. But we spoke about it the other day. 3-5-2 seems the favoured formation, and we've got a solid back four tonight, so it's an interesting move from Lennon.
When I was watching the game at the weekend, James, in the first half, it looked as though Ayer, Duffy and Julien were getting to know each other. That's just natural. Quite a new goalkeeper behind them as well, but they were quite open in the first half in particular. Ross County created loads of chances in the first half. A lot of that was down to the fact they had the wind behind them, but they looked a bit kind of open. Do you think Neil Lennon's taking that on board and thinking, let's tighten it up, play the two fullbacks?
Possibly. I think he's got such a good squad and a lot of depth, so he's probably trying to keep everybody happy at the same time and give everybody an opportunity. I think it was a convincing win at the weekend. You did mention there Ross County had chances, but I think it was more convincing maybe than the Ross County manager made it at the end of the game. But they're good players that have come in, so I think Celtic they want to be on the front foot and get at St Mirren early.
When I look at that, personally, I've been saying all season that we need cover in the full-back positions because it's all fair and well, like Colin says, playing three at the back, but you can't do that indefinitely. You need to have the personnel to adapt it. So from a manager's perspective, James, when you're looking at that four at the back, and it's a traditional lineup, it's almost unfashionable now, but I mean, it still works.
Absolutely. I think he's maybe a surprise element as well for St Mirren. They might have been preparing to play against a back three. And maybe they'll have to make a couple of changes now, and it'll be interesting. Obviously it looks like Christie on the left and Forrest on the right, but that might change. Maybe they'll go either side and have them coming in with the full-backs getting round them on the outside, so it'll be interesting to see how he structures it.
I always look at Celtic sides, and I'm a bit of a traditionalist, I've got to say, and thinking back to the first big season that I was a Celtic fan starting to go to the games was 87-88, the centenary season, and at that time the team was made up primarily of homegrown players and players from, Ireland, and a couple of Northern Irish players in the squad, and Alan McKnight and Anton Rogan. So I love to see the core of the team being Scottish. And obviously you can then complement that by bringing in top class players such as Eduard and hopefully Ayeti, because he looks the real deal as well. It's refreshing to look along that midfield and all four of the players are Scottish. Yeah,
it's a pity Scott Brown still can't see himself playing for Scotland, or that could be 4 or 5 midfielders for Scotland. You've seen them, McGregor, Forrest and Christie recently, and Christie's impact at international level, albeit a couple of penalty kicks, but they've still got to be scored, so you maybe be disappointed that he wasn't playing at the weekend, and you might get a right good reaction for him tonight.
Well, looking at the weekend, I mean, it looked as though he was dropped, but international exertions, El Yunusi also dropped to the bench, having played for his country and played very well. But when you look at Christie, he's the most improved player in that side. I mean, when he was loaned out to Aberdeen, Colin, from a Celtic fan's perspective, if it never came back, there was no complaints at that stage. It hadn't worked out as a young player coming in from Inverness, and it looked as though he was going to go to Aberdeen permanently. From a manager's perspective, how has his transformation impressed you?
Oh, it's been brilliant. I mean, he was at Inverness, obviously, and he was really catching attention then. And for Celtic to get him, it was a bit of a capture, and he maybe just needed that wee step in between going Inverness straight to Celtic's a big move, and that loan move helped him tenfold. That was really important, I think, in his development. You look at him now, I know he wasn't playing at the weekend, but it must have been really hard to leave him at that team.
He's so creative, isn't he? And I think when I'm looking at some of the players in that side, you've got Christie, who was transformed during his loan deal at Aberdeen, McGregor, Notts County, Ayer, Kilmarnock. Now, two of the guys were developed within Scottish football. We've seen last night Scott Robertson had a man of the match performance for Gillingham, 19-year-old Scottish midfielder from Celtic. From your kind of perspective as well at Edinburgh City, would it be possible even to get a few guys from a club like Celtic who have been pushing for a coach side, but in the meantime get a few guys in on loan? Is that something that you would welcome?
Yeah, absolutely. We had taken Grant Savoury last season on loan from Celtic. Obviously, he's away from there now, but he did start last season. I think he made the bench maybe in a European game, and he done really well at us. So sometimes these players just need a wee setback. Maybe they need to realise how hard it is to make it in the game and come down a level before they go back up. So yeah, I would take any Celtic players that one they want. To be honest, they could come to me, no problem.
Just to jump in, sorry, as well, I think looking at this, the Scottish players in the team as well, and I've discussed this with you off air, Paul, as well. I feel for Scott Bain. I think he could be a player that could benefit from a good...
You're a goalie. You're a goalie
Aye,
coach. So yeah, that's a fair comment.
Goalies
Fair
union
comment.
and stuff.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I feel sorry for Scott Bain. I think he's a very good goalkeeper. And obviously the whole thing around Fraser Foster as well at the start of the season, he just must feel no part of that squad, kind of left out slightly. I mean, he could be another player that could benefit from a loan to another club, away and improve himself, get 90 minutes under his belt every week, come back and then really kick on and try and get that number one spot, because I think he deserves it. I think just from an outsider looking in, I rate Scott Bain. I think he's a good goalkeeper.
I mean, you mentioned you had Grant Savoury on loan last season. What is it like for these guys when they make that kind of journey? Because it's like their first senior football. They've only been playing against guys at their own age. So does it take a bit of time for them to settle into actually playing adult football?
Yeah, it's a bit of a culture shock for them, because most of them have been at Celtic a number of years. They've been the top players at their age group all the way up. They've been well looked after. You know, Celtic have got the best of facilities. They've got everything, you know, laid on for them. And then they come to Edinburgh City and it's like, wow, this is like real football. So it is a wee bit of culture shock, and it's probably the ones that adapt to that quicker that can really recover. When I say recover, maybe if they're not getting kept on at Celtic, they can recover and get to a good level. But there's one or two that kind of hit some at that level, and they just, you know, they get shocked by it and spooked, and they're kind of lost to the game, which is a shame, because some of them have been top players, under 15s, under 16s, and
the interesting one for me is was it Conor McBride that moved to Blackburn recently?
Yeah, 2 weeks ago.
Was he on loan at League 2 last season?
Yeah, so I know Conor actually, because he was at Falkirk when I was there. He was a young boy coming through, and when we left Falkirk, he'd obviously moved and went to Celtic, and he went on loan to Stennismuir last season. So it's a great move for him. I actually phoned his dad. His dad's an agent as well, and you know, wish them all the best to go to Blackburn. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes. But I think clubs down south, they look at Celtic players that maybe are not good enough to get into the reserves or the first team, and Celtic let them go. And because down south, you know, their under 23 football gives them another platform. Some clubs are delighted to sign a player from Celtic.
I've been looking at that. It's been a bit of a cause for concern for Celtic fans. Over the last few weeks, we've seen, obviously, the chap you've mentioned there leaving for Blackburn. We've also lost players to Bayern Munich recently and before. And then the word on the street is that Karamoko Dembele might be the next one who to fly the nest. What can Scottish clubs do you think, to prevent the best of young talent from leaving Scotland?
Again, it's really difficult. I mean, just when you're saying there, Paul, I think Hickey was one that was maybe at Celtic as well, and they let go. And obviously Celtic have been spooked a wee bit by the Andy Robertson situation. But you know, it's easy to criticise and say, how did we let Andy Robertson slip through? But Celtic got so many good players across the age groups. You could imagine back when Andy Robertson was playing left back, they probably had another 2 or 3 that you could argue, you know, a good reason. So I've been at that level, at youth level. It's difficult to sort of forecast that all these players are going to make it. And you could argue that if Andy Robertson had stayed at Celtic, he might not have been the player that he was. Maybe that setback, he'd been released, going to Queen's Park and realising what it's like, made him the player that he is. But it's you know, so many good players, and obviously Celtic, the first team, it's hard to blood a youngster because you've got to win every game. The pressure's on, the fans demand, you've got to win.
Yeah.
You know, it's a golden nugget if you get a James Forrest who not just comes in the team, he's been in the team for years, he's been Player of the Year, Football Writers Player of the Year, international. And, you know, for every one that you lose, you've got to remember there's a James Forrest that's come through.
Oh, definitely. Coming back to your point about the goalkeepers as well, I mean, that's one of the areas that Celtic still actually need to strengthen, because I think, I've mentioned time and time again, particularly in the last couple of weeks, Celtic are playing in 5 tournaments this season. 2 Scottish Cups, the Europa League, the League Cup, the League. And if you go in there with just the 2 goalkeepers, there might be a situation, we've seen situations already, where the goalkeepers are gone and you need to get an emergency keeper in. You don't want that the night before a Rangers game, for example, or the night before a Europa League tie. So I think Bain is going to have to show a great deal of patience if he's going to be number 2, but we also actually need to bring in another one. So it's unlikely that he'll get loaned out. I mean, from a goalkeeper's perspective, that must be frustrating as well.
Definitely, mate. I mean, the position itself is all about confidence, is it? I mean, if you're a confident goalkeeper, you're going to be performing, and to be confident, you need to be getting 90 minutes. I mean, obviously, ironically speaking about the whole St Mirren situation recently with goalkeepers as well, it's maybe another reason to have an extra goalkeeper in there as well. I mean, I don't know who's Celtic's third choice at the moment. I couldn't even name you who the third choice goalkeeper is. Is it one of the youth guys? Is it
Hazard, is it?
You're going down to the youth players at that stage,
exactly?
and
So,
even then,
I mean, yeah, maybe they do need to strengthen. And is that then going to allow that, if you do bring in another goalkeeper, is that maybe going to allow him to sit on the bench and you put Bain out on loan, as I suggested, giving him 90 minutes at wherever that may be, and should you require him, then you call him back? It's all about confidence, and I don't think you can be a confident goalkeeper if you're not getting 90 minutes.
no, you're right. And the likes of Conor Hazard, I keep making this argument in relation to strikers at Celtic. When was the last time we produced a goal-scoring striker at Celtic? And this is a club who has the finances behind a youth development system where we're signing up some of the best talent in Scottish football and beyond. Yet the last goal-scoring striker, beyond Sean Maloney, who wasn't an out-and-out forward, he played more kind of wide out once he got into the team, was Jerry Craney in the 1990s, and before him it was Charlie Nicholas in the 1980s. So why can't we produce a striker? Why can't we produce a goalie?
Well, I think we thought obviously at Celtic had maybe found a new striker in Tony Watt when he broke through and he got that goal against Barcelona. I remember watching the game thinking, oh my God, he's going to kick on, he's going to be a great striker, but it just didn't seem to work out for him. And then obviously likes of Craig Beattie as well. I know he did fairly well, but he never really kicked on to that sort of level, did he really? So I mean, you raise a great point. I mean, why you not a club like Celtic bringing through the best strikers in Scottish football, the best goalkeepers in Scottish football, seem to be doing well in midfield. But
no, you're right, and I think the argument was raised, but we came to the conclusion that it was a Scottish-wide problem. We're struggling at international level to find strikers. We're playing a guy, Lyndon Dykes, who could have played for Australia. His rise has been kind of meteoric. I don't think we've seen that coming from a guy who was playing for the Queen of the South team to move up to Livy and then on to Queen's Park Rangers. So I think it's a Scotland-wide problem. And I'll come back to yourself, James, because it's a difficult one for me to answer. From a coach's perspective, where do you think the problem lies producing Scottish forwards that can score goals?
I think it is a Scottish problem. You see the problem Steve Clarke had picking a team there. He had really one striker to choose from. He had a strong central midfield player playing at the back, so it's not just strikers. I think centre backs seem to be a problem as well. Obviously Kieran Tierney's played a wee bit out of position to accommodate himself and Andy Robertson, so we seem to have a lot of good midfielders. We're kind of developing the same type of player, a lot of midfielders that can take the ball and play. You've seen the changes that Steve Clarke made for one game to the next. It was, he changed 4 or 5, and a lot of it was midfielders as well. So I don't know that is the quickest answer really. I wish I did know. There's a lot of good talented young boys, as I say, at the youth ages, but to break into a Celtic team again, you've got to be scoring every game, haven't you? There's that pressure of stepping up. You're not really getting a chance to miss too many chances.
Yeah. One player who obviously is Scottish, who does score goals and who isn't on the bench tonight, and I keep banging the drum for Lee Griffiths, Colin. What was the outcome of the press conference with Neil Lennon when he was questioned about the fitness of Lee Griffiths? So
we can see obviously that Lee Griffiths and another player who we spoke about before, Tom Rogic, back in the training squad, training on a weekly basis. It's an interesting one with Lee Griffiths. I mean, when you take a look at it, he was meant to be so far behind in training that we left him behind when we went to France, came back. He looked very sharp in the pre-season games, picks up an injury here or there. His private life becomes more public, and we don't see as much of Lee Griffiths. If you could get the Lee Griffiths fully concentrated on the game the way he kind of was after the January break last year, I think he got something like 9 or 10 goals from January onwards last season. The last game, ironically enough, against St Mirren, he scored a hat-trick. So he is a big miss, and he's a big miss to Scottish football. I liked what you said, James, earlier about trying to play players out of position. When we played McTominay at centre-half, he was, I hate to say this, he was terrible. He was...
Don't hold back, Colin.
I know. He was... you could tell he was playing out of position.
Yep.
When you looked at Near Beaton playing for Israel, he looked as a competent centre-half. But Scott McTominay looked just completely out of position. So it is becoming a problem throughout Scottish football that there's certain positions we can't develop. We can't develop a forward, we can't develop a centre half, but they're the core of your team. So when you're saying about bringing guys like Griffiths through, imagine having a fit Griffiths for Celtic and for Scotland. It would be win-win.
I think there's maybe been some internal thing that's maybe happened there. As an outsider looking in, you know the kind of person that Griffiths is. He's maybe said something out of tongue that maybe he shouldn't have said and he maybe regrets. The other thing is that people are very quick to make opinions of players and people in the public eye. So, I mean, that's maybe me just making an opinion of Griffiths as he maybe said something out of tongue, because you know the kind of outspoken player that Griffiths is. But you're right, you're bang on. He's a good goal scorer. He knows where the back of the net is, and it must be frustrating not to see him in your starting lineup.
Definitely.
I noticed there that the two matchday pundits for St Mirren TV are guys who have been on a Celtic state of mind. So obviously you come on here and you go on to bigger and better things. So you two guys, watch this space. But what was interesting when we were speaking to Danny Lennon was he was talking about getting into his players' psyche, and he was talking about the psychological aspect of managing. And it's something I'm really interested in, because I think it would be such a difficult thing, because it used to be back in the day, you're talking tactics, you're talking self-motivation, man motivation, all this kind of thing. It's now a massive part of your job, isn't it? To actually get into the player's mind, their state of mind, and trying to prepare them mentally as well. How difficult is that for a manager?
Yeah, I'm sure it's difficult, maybe more so at our level, but to play for Celtic, I think you've got to, you've got to be mentally really strong, and especially this season, this 10 in a row. If you're not mentally ready for that, then there's a big problem. Lennon needs, you mentioned Scott Bain and strength and depth. If Lee Griffiths can come back, he's capable of being the one that, who knows, he maybe come into a team and get big goals at big time. He's capable of doing that. He's had his issues, but when he takes to the pitch, he can handle big occasions. He scored his goals against England for Scotland. He scored in big games for Hibs. He scored in every club he's played at. He's a natural goal scorer. Maybe he's not great in playing in a 4-4-2. Maybe that's something to, can he play with Edward? I don't know, but he likes to play up on his own space to run. But certainly, from a manager's point of view, I mean, Lenny will be at them all the time in terms of, every game you must win, and that's Celtic every year, every season, every competition, you must win. So you're talking about these players, they should be the most mentally strong in the country, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Simi, I'm having a look here at the 5 tournaments, and I'm also looking at the fact that you need to try and balance that with the youth players coming in. How do they develop? They need to get games. Going back to what James is saying, every game is pressure filled for Celtic this season because of the fact that we're going for 10 in a row. There's such a focus on 10 in a row. Do you think there comes a point, and I know that we're going for this quadruple treble from last season, we're going for a 5th treble this season. Does there come a point where you say, you know what, let's have a look at the League Cup this season and let's try and blood some of the young players in? It might mean that you're not going to win that tournament, but it gives people the opportunity to play first team football.
Yep. I'm sure Neil Lennon will just be telling his players, let's just take every game as it comes. Let's just focus on the next game coming on Saturday. Yes, it'll be in the back of every player's mind in that Celtic changing room. We're going for 10 in a row. Of course it is. It's only natural, but I don't think Neil Lennon will be naive enough to rant on about that. I think he'll be, let's take this next game as it comes. We'll focus on whoever it may be, St Mirren on Wednesday night. That's who we're focusing on. This is how we're going to line up. That's our focus. Forget about who we're playing next week. Then after this game's out of the way, we focus for Saturday's game or Sunday's game, whoever it is we're playing. We focus on that. I mean, I'm sure that's how you line your teams up, James, isn't it? You don't look too far ahead. Just focus on Saturday's game, because if you focus on that 10 in a row, like you say, or winning the Scottish Cup, winning next year's Scottish Cup, this year's Scottish Cup, it's just going to play with the players' minds, and they're going to get anxious and they're going to get nervous. And just focus on the next game coming. I'm sure that's what Lenny will be telling his players.
I think what you were saying there, I think he'd probably love that chance to play young boys in the League Cup. But it's probably been a victim of the success that they've had. You're talking trebles. We've lost count now how many in a row, and I think he doesn't want to break that. So they want to win every competition. I think maybe if they hadn't won the League Cup maybe last year, he would just sacrifice that one and just concentrate on the league. But because they've just been on such a strong winning streak, you don't want to be, get a League Cup tie against, a championship team, for example, and say, right, we'll just play a Colts team or a third team. And then that's a game that breaks the mould, and you just don't know the effect that has.
Yeah, mentally, yeah.
And then you're known as the manager that broke that run, that dominance.
Well, you look at like the English clubs and how they approach the League Cup, and you can understand why they do it because of the rewards financially in the league. but some of them could do with winning a trophy. And you just wonder why did you not play a strong team in that and get a trophy? You know, get yourself started, win a trophy. It might be your best chance, but you know, we're all talking about attacking. I think as well, it's worth mentioning the defensive side of Celtic. I think Rangers this season have had all the plaudits, breaking records, clean sheets. I think I'm right in saying Celtic have only conceded a penalty and an own goal in the league. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much so far. Yeah.
You know, changes to the defence again, and they've been really strong defensively as well.
I just want to touch on something you mentioned earlier when you're talking about having strength and depth. Now, obviously, this season, we're looking at it tonight, we've got 9 subs on the bench, and you look at it, there's plenty of attacking options. You've got Ayeti, you've got Elianusi, you've got Frimpong, guys like that can come on. Hopefully, we're looking to bring back guys like Rogic and Griffiths. What difference will that make for you as a manager to be able... Will you be able to name 9 subs?
I believe so. I don't know if I've got 20 players at my club that I can strip every week, to be honest. So again, if we can get a couple of boys on loan, that would help. But I think it helps the bigger clubs. I mean, in whatever league you're in. I mean, you look at that Celtic bench. You know, I think Jim Goodwin's done a brilliant job at St Mirren. But I bet you would take every one of those players at St Mirren. So
it would start. It would start every game.
Well, Turnbull's the classic example. They've been after him for over a year. He's come in from, you know, a strong Motherwell side. The last season, I know they've struggled a wee bit this season, but you'll take time to get into that team, and probably would play in, I don't know, 9 or 10 of the other teams in the league. So the depth that Celtic have got, you said there, if the changes that they've made, you know, 4 or 5, 6 of them could start in the next game, and nobody would blink an eye.
Simi, I'm going back to Neil Lennon again and the Lee Griffiths saga situation, whatever it may be. Very little comes out of the club, which I think is a good thing. You know, I've been getting the team lines sent to me, which are incorrect, and I'm glad because I don't want there to be a leak in the camp. So the Lee Griffiths situation is that he's fit. And I'm going to go back to a player who has also played for Celtic and Hibs, Anthony Stokes. So he signs for Livingston 3 weeks ago, and now he's gone. And I've got severe concerns for the career of Anthony Stokes. I think as a striker, as a player, very, very talented boy, right? And we've seen for seasons how talented he was at Celtic Park. We've then seen it under Neil Lennon at Hibs. And I think Neil Lennon managed them very, very well on a one-to-one basis. And I think also Lennon's not been given the credit for the way that he's managed the Lee Griffiths situation, maybe prior to this season. He's come out publicly and criticised them previously about his fitness this season. I think Neil Lennon's man management is incredible, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it. You look at Ncham, and Ncham was wanting to leave Celtic a year ago, and Lennon turned him round. He's going away to French newspapers and giving them stories about, I'm too good for the Scottish League, I want to move. And he managed to get another season, and he's still playing. So I think it's time people realise just how good a man manager Neil Lennon is.
I mean, that's it. I mean, this could all be part of a big master plan, as Oasis would say. Is he doing this to try and then get a bigger reaction for E. Griffiths when he does get another chance? So you bring him in the big games and say, right, now's your chance, go prove yourself, Lee. You've been left out. Go and state your claim now. Go on and bang in some goals like you did for Scotland. On you go, now's your chance. Show everybody the kind of player you are. So the comeback, he's got a point to prove when he does get another chance. If he does get another chance, I hope he does. But that's what I'm saying. Is this part of a master plan? Is this a good bit of man-to-man management, like you say, by Neil Lennon, resting him, making him feel that he's no part of the squad, and all of a sudden, boom, you're in. You're part of the squad. Go and state your case, and you'll get 110% from him.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to something James said there, and I'm sure there are other clubs who are saying, oh, it'd be great to have 20 players that we could strip. I just don't understand why clubs like Celtic with big squads don't loan out a dozen young players, because they're not playing. And this is my frustration, because they get maybe to a point up to about the age of 18 where if they continue to play against boys the same age as them, they're not going to develop. And there used to be, maybe back in your day as a player as well, the reserve league. So you would then be able to go in, Danny Lennon spoke about it when he was a youngster at Hibs, and you could actually test yourself against top quality players. And you learned more from 90 minutes of football than anybody could teach you from a textbook. So do you think we're going to get to the stage where the bigger clubs, if you like, are able to get their young players into clubs like Edinburgh City and other clubs within your division?
Yeah, I hope so. I don't think that they have to have a Celtic Colts team. I think there's plenty of part-time clubs that would encourage partnerships with these clubs and take, I think the loan rules changed this season. They changed last season, and it was to the detriment of young players. I thought it was a strange decision, but this season they've went back, so you can now loan 4 players for one club.
Right.
So I mean, if you take Edinburgh City for example, 4 Celtic players coming to us would be great for us, but it'd also be great for them to develop together.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've been lucky. I've speak to Chris McCart, and we had Grant Savoury last season. We had Kieran Diver the season before. So you'd welcome these players with open arms. I think it's difficult at youth level as well, because you've got to be seen as producing. And people might ask questions if you keep putting your players at other clubs. They're saying, well, they might be saying, well, why have we got you here? So there's good coaches there. There's a good setup. Strong setup. And it's difficult to get them through. Mm-hmm. It's just really hard.
Yeah.
The interesting change I'd like to discuss before we get to kick off, because it's fast approaching, is welcoming Klamala into the side tonight. Now, I think it's his first start tonight, Klamala. That might be wrong there. Someone will correct me, but he's certainly been, hit and miss since he's came in. Missed a bit of a sitter at the weekend, made up for it with a goal. What have you seen from Klamala so far to suggest that he's been worth that sort of outlay that Celtic made for him, about £3 million, something like that?
Well, from my perspective, I think what you've seen from him is a willingness, and I've noticed that Celtic are wearing the lime green kit, so that was a good suggestion.
I like that. Called it.
The 1986 style. A willingness to do what he's told. And that's the biggest issue, because that's obviously where there's been issues between Neil Lennon and Lee Griffiths this season. Klamala, on the other hand, has come back completely conditioned. He's worked hard, and there is a willingness. Now, he'll miss a few chances. We spoke about that. He's missed a few sitters. He'll miss a few chances, but there's a willingness for him to do what he's told. Now, managers, I think, rely on players like that. Lennon loved Johnny Hayes for that reason.
Yep.
If you play left back, he'll do what he's told, and then you'll drop him the following week. There was an occasion where Johnny Hayes played remarkably well against Aberdeen, his former club up at Pittodrie. Dropped for the next game against Rangers, no complaints. And I think to have a few players like that in your team must be brilliant for a manager.
I think so. Like Edouard and Ayete are scoring goals, and Klamala, as you said, missed a chance but scored a goal. So again, it's trying to keep people happy. I think Ayete will be disappointed, but maybe he's saying to Klamala, well, go and start the game. Let's see if you can. I mean, would you write him off scoring 2 or 3 tonight? Probably not. He might miss 2 or 3. He looks like that type of player, but
definitely,
it's that strength and depth again. And I think Celtic maybe rub it in a wee bit with these colours. Mentioning 86 with the Jambos there against St Mirren.
This one's for Craig Levine. So just a quick prediction. We've already had one earlier today from Colin, which I believe was 3-0.
4-0.
4-0 he's changed it to.
I'll say 3-0.
I'll say 3-0. James?
I'll go 5-0.
5-0. I'll go for 2-0 to Celtic. So enjoy the game, and we'll be back with you at half time for more analysis.